We're back with a special edition of Capital Dateline, where we're covering an event sponsored by the Associated Press, which brought together state elected officials and candidates for governor and attorney general. The AP conference was an opportunity for editors and reporters from across Florida to hear directly from the political leaders they cover. We now go to the Democratic candidates for attorney general, who are hoping to replace Republican incumbent Pam Bondi. First up, George Sheldon, a former state representative and secretary of the Florida Department of Children and Families. He has just completed a stint in Washington as assistant secretary in the Department of Health and Human Services. His experience has helped build a foundation for his goals as attorney general.
I remember going to Texas and seeing Head Start kids who were getting a leg up for school, and it's where I really developed a huge commitment for early childhood education. You talk to any sheriff in this state, you talk to any law enforcement in this country, they will tell you if you really want to deal with the underpinnings of crime, you got to get to kids before the age of 5. 85% of brain development occurs by the time a child is 3 years old.
Mr. Sheldon criticized Florida officials, including the Attorney General, for fighting in federal court to stop Obamacare.
My view of an Attorney General is an Attorney General really ought to be above the partisan fray. An Attorney General ought to be fundamentally a moral pillar that goes after the bad guys, upholds the Constitution, defends access to the polls and people's voting rights. And that's the reason I didn't have to come back to Florida. But I thought it was important to come home to the state that I love and care about and try to do something to move Florida in a different direction.
State Representative Perry Thurston serves as the Democratic leader of the Florida House and is also seeking the Democratic nomination for Attorney General. Saying he will be the people's attorney, Representative Thurston outlined his goals.
There's a reason why I'm running for Attorney General. Consistently, Florida needs someone who's going to fight for the people of the state of Florida. There are great things with pill mills, and there are great things with human trafficking, but there are lots of other needs here in the state of Florida. The Attorney General, if you look up the Constitution, should be the people's lawyer, the lawyer for the people of the state of Florida. Well, I don't think that you're the people lawyer if you're fighting political partisan agenda. And let me tell you where I'm coming from. Let's start with medical marijuana. You heard the Attorney General that was just here say that she's going to vote against medical marijuana, as is her right. I'll be voting for it. But my problem is more with why are you opposing giving the people the opportunity to vote on the issue? Is it because we've heard that a certain sector of the community will be voting for this party as opposed to that party? That's what I have a problem with. Political partisan agenda. Are you supporting the people, what the people's right? Are we expanding rights for people? Let's go to affordable health care. If the current Attorney General comes in and make one of her #1 principles affordable health care, it's unconstitutional. And I'll fight it and spend millions of dollars to prove that it's unconstitutional. Neither one of those measures panned out. Neither one of them. But is that a partisan agenda? Should the people's attorney be fighting to deny people health coverage? Should the people's attorney be fighting to say, well, if you've got a pre-existing condition, you don't deserve to have insurance? Is there an alternative that was being offered, or do we just want to deprive millions of people of the right to have health insurance? The people's attorney. When I think about the people's attorney, I think about, do we have suspicious list drug testing? You may say, well, that's the governor's initiative. Well, if I'm the Attorney General and it's illegal and I know that it's unconstitutional, I think I'm going to lean in and I'm going to weigh in on that subject. If I'm the people's attorney. If I see lines of people can't vote for 8 hours, being deprived of their constitutional rights. I'm going to weigh in on that subject as the Attorney General. I'm going to fight for the people. Florida deserves an Attorney General that's going to fight for those type of issues.
Next on the agenda, Democratic candidates for governor. Former Senate Democratic leader Nan Rich from Broward County is challenging former Florida Governor Charlie Crist for the Democratic nomination for governor. As governor, she promised that education would be her top priority and believes student testing policies must change.
As governor, I will set new priorities to get our state back on the right track, and my first priority would be improving public education. Governors Scott, Crist, and Bush dedicated much of their time to instituting so-called reform to our education system. They cut funding for public education, instituted high-stakes testing, and expanded vouchers. Last year, Scott even called, as you may remember, an education summit with 3 days' notice, attended by more legislators than educators. So did any of these so-called reforms make Florida schools the envy of the nation? No. Instead, they produced a broken system of accountability. Teachers are leaving the system because the emphasis continues to be on high-stakes testing. Having to teach to a test that is punitive rather than diagnostic. This has been going on, as I mentioned, for almost 16 years. We need strong standards for our schools, but we also need all the stakeholders at the table. The people who are charged with implementing the standards need to be part of developing them. My position on minimum wage is also materially different from both Scott and Crist. I believe that a minimum wage that leaves full-time workers living below the poverty line is unacceptable. Rick Scott actually said that increasing a minimum wage, and I quote him, makes him cringe when he heard about Senator Bullard and Representative Stafford's bill. Meanwhile, Charlie Crist said he is satisfied with increasing it the mere 14 cents to $7.93 an hour. Well, that's not good enough. I support the legislation that has been filed this year to increase the minimum wage to $10.10, and as governor, I would sign that bill as soon as it landed on my desk. The fact is, there are many issues of substance that matter to voters, where I disagree with Rick Scott and Charlie Crist, as do the voters. I am pro-choice, they are not. I believe in responsible gun laws and always have. I have always supported gay adoption and marriage equality, and the list goes on. I believe a majority of Florida voters have had enough of the attacks on women's reproductive rights. We saw that in the 2012 election. The dangerously irresponsible gun laws, the chronically underfunded schools and social services, and the embarrassing anti-gay discrimination that has marked the last 8 years under Charlie Crist and Rick Scott. That is their record. And while you will hear a lot of new promises from both of them in the coming months, nothing tells you what a politician will do quite like what he or she has done. Rick Scott and Charlie Crist have had their chance to lead, and I believe that they have failed. From my travels all across the state, the people of Florida are ready for a strong Democrat to lead. I believe I am that Democrat.
The race for governor of Florida will be one of the most watched in the nation because former Republican Governor Charlie Crist is trying to win back his old job, but this time as a Democrat.
I really want to create good jobs for the future of our state. You know, not just small jobs, but good jobs for our people. And you do that with good education. You do that with innovation. You do that with thinking big, not thinking small. And I know Florida's prepared for it. We're almost the third largest state in the country, as you know. And that's going to come very quickly. And if our children are going to be hopeful and our parents are going to be happy for their kids, we have got to focus on education and not whipsaw it from one legislative session to the next. You know, teachers need to be appreciated every year, not just once in a while, not just when there's an election coming up. They don't deserve to be treated that way. 2 of my 3 sisters have been public school teachers here in Florida. It matters, it's important, and they deserve to be paid well. And the minimum wage needs to go up. The President talked about it last night. He said it's easy to remember, 10-10. And if they can't do it up there because of the gridlock they've got, we need to do it here. Because, friends, I'll tell you, people are still hurting. I go to Publix, I go to CVS, I go to 7-Eleven and Circle K, and I talk to real Floridians every day. And they need help. And it's coming. We've got 9 months to go. And we can change all of this. All of it. And we can make sure that we have a great Supreme Court going forward. Thank God for the Florida Supreme Court and our judiciary. Because the other 2 branches are in the hands of the other party. And as I said, the leadership of the party, not the people in it, but the leadership of the party has gone off to the right so hard, it's shocking. It really is.
In closing, Mr. Crist took a jab at Governor Scott's budget.
I want to support education every year. He does it some of the time. And as I understand it, I haven't really seen the whole budget, but I understand in the numbers he talked about today, he's imposing upon local governments to pay about $300 million more in property taxes? Who's running the show around this place? That's not right. When I was governor, we reduced property taxes and property insurance. You know, these are things that affect middle-class people every single day, and they're not focused on them here anymore because you have to care about them first. And I care about them.